But now, if we zoom in here, it really did do a great job, didn't it, with that fur? So not too bad. But on this purple solid background, we do see a little bit of discrepancy here, and we're probably not going to keep this dog. So this is where it's harder to get that nice accurate detail in the close crop. So I'm going to put a brick wall in here. So I've provided that as well. So how do you add another image in behind if it's not just going to be a solid color and you want to actually place an image? Like you want to put yourself in a city, you want to put yourself standing on the edge of a beautiful forest. What is it that you want to put in your background? So in this particular case, I'm going to file, place. We don't copy and paste, we file, place. In Photoshop, they added the word embedded here. So we're going to place embedded. And I've provided you with a brick wall. So we're going to place this brick wall. Now it is clearly far too small. So while the bounding box is here, we can see that it has anchor points. I'm going to grab the, sorry, I have to move this back into view. I have to grab the corner anchor point, and I can distort this. Do I want to distort the image? I do not. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, and that will allow me to grab a corner anchor point and keep the image in proportion. All right. So I'm going to move my toolbox here over here, and I'm going to make this bigger, and so it fills the page. Now I do want the sidewalk at the bottom for sure. Now that I have filled and I've committed to the size, I'm going to hit enter, or on a Mac, return. And as you can see, it's in front of my dog. So what I'm going to do is, again, take this brick wall, drag it below the dog close crop layer, and look at that. That's a pretty nice looking image, close crop on this brick wall. Now the dog should be standing on the sidewalk, so that looks a little bit funny. So I'm going to take this brick wall layer, I'm going to click on the move tool, and I'm going to click and move the image up. Because if this is going to be realistic looking, the dog's feet have to be on this side of the sidewalk, on this side of the brick wall. So this looks more realistic, but we do not have enough image. In order to make alterations and to add to this image, the first thing I have to do is get rid of this thing called a smart object in this layer. So we placed a new image, but whenever you place an image, it automatically comes in by default as a smart object. So if I wanted to make any alterations to it, I can't. I can size it, but I can't add color, I can't delete anything, I can't add anything. So I need to right click on this layer, and I need to choose this thing called Rasterize. I wonder if I can get that into better view here. Okay, so there's Rasterize layer. That will remove the smart object and allow me to make alterations. So what alterations am I going to make? Well, I'm going to take this selection tool we learned to use earlier, the rectangular marquee, and I'm going to slightly overlap the image. And I don't think I have quite enough overlap. Now, why do I need an overlap at all? Well, if I'm going to use Content Aware, the tool that is going to automatically fill in this extra area with a sampling of what I have above, I need a slight overlap, and also so I don't create a white gap in between, I need that overlap there in order to sample and create this. I'm going to turn the dog off. The great thing about this Content Aware to fill this space with this slight overlap is Photoshop's pretty smart. So it's most likely going to also continue this diagonal line. So let's see what happens now. I have the brick wall selected. I need to make a selection and slightly overlap my selection. And then I'm going to go edit, fill, and choose content aware. This is one of the best things ever. So hit OK. And that's pretty awesome, except, so close with the overlap here. So I'm going to Control Z. What happens if I grab more of an overlap? So I'm going to start over here, come over here, and you'll see the difference, like big gap, little gap. It doesn't take very long to do, so just undo it and try it again. Content aware. And see what it's done? The extra overlap has now sampled part of the brick wall. So that's too much. So what we need to do is just get that very tiny overlap. And let's see if this one doesn't work. So again, Control Z, deselect, try a new one. It takes seconds to do. So you're better off to try doing it again. Fill, content aware. There we go, even better. So you can see this little pebble here at the bottom is actually a sample up here. So the smaller the overlap, the better. And let's turn our dog back on. There we go. So the only thing left to do is to give him a drop shadow. Now I could show you how to select the dog, like so. Whoops, I don't want to disable the layer. I'm going to select the dog. I can create a new layer and call it doggy shadow. There we go. And while that image is selected, see, you can see that it's selected. So if I choose this background, I got my doggy shadow selected. And this time I'm going to reset the colors back in my toolbox at the bottom here to black and white by simply clicking the default foreground and background colors. See how it defaults back to the black? And I'm going to edit fill and choose the foreground color, or black is already in here, so I can choose black. And I selected the background. What happens when I want to select the foreground? So I'm going to Control Z that. You can see that there's a marquee floating around the background in my image. I actually don't have the image that I want to fill selected. This is where the select menu comes in. So any selection has its own set of selection options. So I just need to inverse my selection. Now the marquee is gone from the top and it only has the dog selected. Whoops, I didn't want to move him. And I'm going to edit fill and let's see if I get the right thing. Yep, Control D, deselect. Now look at that amazing selection that we made here. Pretty cool, right? We do have this little tidbit up here, so with my selection tool, just get rid of it. So I'm going to move this underneath this dog, and let's turn this back on. So I have a doggy shadow now. How do I select it? Control T. I now have a bounding box. Let's see, is it in there? There he is. Oh, look. We could do all sorts of things with his shadow. We could have his shadow run up against the wall. That looks pretty cool. We can do all sorts of things. So it just depends on where you want the light direction to come from. Now, if I look at his eye, the light is coming forward. It's coming from in front of him. It could be coming a bit from the top. So how am I going to work with this shadow? Well, I could do all sorts of things. I could skew it. I could do all sorts of things, and I could utilize this as my shadow. But there's a much easier way to do this. I can simply create a new layer. Again, call it doggy shadow. And underneath my dog, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to paint. I'm going to get my brush size here. A little bit bigger. There we go. A little bit bigger than that. And I'm literally going to start painting. I'm going to get a bit of a stronger brush here. And I'm going to start painting I know it looks crude. I know it looks weird. But I'm going to start painting underneath the dog here. So where is the shadow coming from? Or your light source? So that's the only thing to consider here. I'm going to make this brush a little bit bigger. There we go. Notice I'm using a super soft brush. Get a little bit more shadow going here. It would be more accurate using the shape of the dog, but it's so much more involved. This is a pretty simple, easy way to add a shadow. I know it doesn't look like much now. Don't worry. There we go. Because in our layer styles, our layer palette here, we can multiply this to blend it into the image below, and then we can reduce the opacity. So you want the control here. You want the control. Now, if you've gone too far, well, that's not too hard. We take our eraser tool and we come back at it. So it's at 12%. And we just start erasing what we don't want. So the shadow is always darkest closer to the object and then starts to fade away the further it gets. Okay, so you can paint in shadows. You can do all sorts of things in here. And look at our amazing close crop of a dog standing on a sidewalk that we added to. And it's looking pretty awesome. So that is using our selection tools to make our crop. Once you've made your selection, you use the select and mask tool, add your edge detection, turn on smart radius to increase it, and let Photoshop do the work. Come over here with your radius paintbrush and paint in more of the detail all the way around the dog, don't forgetting to zoom in, and then choose your new layer with layer mask in order to get this option here. Then we make our selection and delete the background here and add a few more details, including whatever background you want, in order to get a more realistic close crop. So there we go. Our little Cairn Terrier close crop, and how to use the select and mask tool to get those awesome hairs and fuzzies included in your selection without making it look like a terrible cut out with a pair of scissors close crop.